Okay, so I'm really glad that you said something about that particular president in Poland being considered far right. Okay, so that's my second question is I want to know what exactly is a far right Republican, right? Because I have heard many different people be called far right. Okay, I've heard it be ascribed to the Gen 6 rioters, people who are there, who are literally breaking into the Capitol, who are trying to do whatever they're doing there. I've also heard people like fucking Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz be called far right.
Kevin McCarthy even.
Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah.
So it seems
Tim
as though
Pool's far right.
It seems as though there's a disparity in what that definition really is, because to me, even though you have people, Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy, who are defending, quote unquote, if that's what you want to say, the January 6th protesters, they seem to be speaking up for them to not be locked in prison for indefinite periods of time, but they're speaking out for them, they're defending them, right? So there's a certain ideology there, but they're not protecting them actually breaking into the Capitol. They're very much saying, like, this was a bad thing that you did. You know, the extent that this was taken out to was a bad idea. So, like I said, there's a disparity here in what really is considered far right. So I want to know what you guys think that means compared to the different varying definitions that we hear in mainstream media.
Gotcha. Josh, do you want to go first?
Sure. Far right, that is a hard one. Because
there's no right answer. It's totally just because no one fucking knows. Like I said, I don't even know at this point. You know,
I have the answer.
Like,
you got it. We've solved it. Far right's a difficult one because I think a lot of the discourse. I'm thinking as someone who listens and like tunes into like a lot of like liberal markets. A lot of people view Democrats as centrist, and so if you start off as Democrats as the center, then pretty much a large portion of the Republican Party is de facto far right.
Right.
So usually pretty much anyone, I'm thinking Freedom Caucus is typically seen as far right. Marjorie Taylor Greene's like like the poster girl of the far right.
MTG Wild, man.
I would say there's certain sections I would consider Joe Rogan far right. That's
interesting.
Yeah.
Certain sections.
Because again, this is putting the Democratic Party as the centrist party.
Right.
So this is an Overton window situation.
Yeah. So essentially, what they're saying is Democrats are the centrist party, and even sections of the Democrats are right leaning. So with that in mind, a large portion of the Republican Party would be far right. Pretty much. Yeah. So I think that's the way that a lot of people describe it. I guess what I would say is far right. This is a really hard one because there's certain sections of far right. You might be socially far right, you know, like an evangelical Christian is probably very far right socially.
Oh yeah.
You know, which
very
is
anti-gay rights type of thing.
Anti-gay rights, anti-trans, but it's also like, but they might be like, hey, Social Security should exist because I believe that. Does that make them far right when they're far right socially, but economically, they might actually be more liberal. Like I know a lot of African Americans are this way, where they vote for Democrats, but they are socially very conservative,
right?
But economically pretty liberal. So where do they go?
Because even I think that's a really good point. Because even a lot of the like far right Republicans that you talked about, who are against kind of entitlements in general, are still supportive of like Social Security. Whether or not that's because they're hamstrung to it because they're Republican and that's just part of the Republican deal now, is like we're never going to fuck with Social Security, or because they really think that it's a valuable asset that should continue to exist, they are pro some of these entitlement programs when they are generally in favor of reform at the very least, if not like a complete do away with a lot of those entitlement programs. So I think that's a very interesting point.
Yeah, because like you would never see like NPR talking about like some black church in the South as far right,
right?
You know,
no.
But if like Marjorie Taylor Greene voices the same thing, it's like, oh, she has far right opinions,
right?
Which is, I think it's largely social, but it's also social and. I think it's social. Like, people don't usually say far right for economic reasons. It's largely social beliefs. I think
so. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like an economic issue or whatever where people are, you know, called far right or something. I'm like, that's not usually where it's always in the social realms.
Yeah.
That's where
like
the
Nikki
biggest thing
Haley is very economically conservative and like anti entitlements, but no NPR decently likes her. They wouldn't call her far right.
Right.
Well, yeah. I can Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is tough for me. So I think I like where we're kind of having this conversation right now. It's almost like, because I think depending on how it's presented and who's presenting it, if you say the far right Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, you're labeling her with the scarlet letter of far right for reasons, right? The far right podcaster Joe Rogan,
Right.
okay, he's a very, very liberal dude. He's a hippie that likes guns and likes to eat or kill and eat animals. That's about as far right as he gets.
It's
Or,
vaccines,
you know,
mainly. That's the far
vaccines
right.
was a big one, But realistically, in most modern like mass media context, calling somebody far right is just a scarlet letter to tell you how you're supposed to think of them. These people are bad. They're dangerous. We have to make sure we put them in the corner. They're outside the Overton window. Their opinions and their views don't belong here. They're outside. So by labeling them that, you already have an air of disrespect or
don't take them seriously.
don't take them seriously, right? In reality, I think really if you want to label people left or right, you got to break out the old T-chart and just go issue by issue. Do you lean that way? Do you lean that way? Do you lean that way? Then you just take a total of it, and if you're +3 to the right side, now you're a right wing guy, or maybe you can call it conservative, but these are all just labels at the end of the day. If you're gonna have a real substantial or substantive conversation about it, you got to go issue by issue, and then context, reasonings, why you ended up in that position. And, it can't just be like, well, I'm anti-abortion. Well, let me explain to you why. Maybe I won't sound so extreme if I say I'm anti-abortion, if I walk you through my logic and my thinking to get to this point.
Right.
But if I just say, yeah, I'm pro-life, that means like that's a right-wing view. So I'm on that spectrum now, on that side. So I mean, there's a reality to political labels, and then there's the colloquial use of them these days, which have almost no tie to reality when it comes to issues-based like leanings. So that's what I would say. Like, and
They're weaponized almost.
yeah. I mean, and it's all propaganda. It's supposed to be meant for the listener or the viewer to already shape their point of view before you give them the
Just
information.
to put you in the right mindset.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that like Republicans will do to Democrats, call them communists. It's like
Yeah.
none of their opinions.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, they
like there's a couple commies, but
Yeah.
but they, like I can
Legit
call
They
communists.
probably
also say that.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, I'm a communist. What of it?
yeah. But then
Because communists are proud about being communists.
Precisely.
Like,
but I
hell
mean,
yeah.
like at the end of the day, I would probably call 99% of politicians commies, just as a colloquial title, because they're all about stealing people's money and then wasting it.
Right.
Like I will do and you have to do what they say. It's like you can find colloquial meanings to tie a label to somebody in the political realm for whatever reason, but are they an actual communist? No.
They read Marx.
Yeah, they're like most of them don't know how to read as it is. So like they're not going to be diving into Marxist literature and shit like that to actually truly understand and become a devout a fellow traveler. Is that what they call those? If you're
I don't know.
yeah, I don't know.
I
But
know
yeah.
what we're talking. I can't.
Yeah,
I
we all know what we're talking about. But yeah, that almost has little to
Comrade,
no.
is that what you're looking for?
Conrad Commissar. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you get the understanding though. Most people just fall in line with whatever bigger political group they feel comfortable with, and some of them are commies. Yeah, some of them are just people that are very far left on certain issues, and those are their big important issues. The Israel-Palestine thing is that's a big dividing line for a lot of people right now. If you're on one side, then you're a leftist. If you're on the other side, then you're like a genocidal right-winger. It's like, it's not a good way to be talking about people.
Right.
But this is what the propagandists do. This is why they label people far right or far left, or even just leftist this or commie that, whatever it is. Even like neocon. Neocons, that's the same type of deal. It's just these colloquial terms that we've come up with now to try to loosely label large groups of people, which is never really a good idea if you want to have an actual substantial conversation.
Right.
Substantive. I keep saying substantial. Substantive conversation. So there you go.
But I guess as a negative to that, what if you are, with the way we have media now, a lot of it's short form, like whether it be TikTok, Twitter, Facebook.
Not in this house.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is like those short forms of far right communists, neocon leftists are, I'm not gonna say they're useful, but they are labels that are useful in this short form media. Like, you don't want to say well, they actually had different diverse opinions and they're against the war in Vietnam in 1970s, but nowadays, like, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, now they want to go to
it's
war.
just like they're a neocon.
Yeah, no, and it works for whatever kind of conversation you're trying to have, depending on what you're trying to do. Yeah, and especially in short form, there's no other ability to have those types of conversations without coming up with those loose titles like that. We're like, okay, we're going to generally talk about these basket of deplorables, so we're going to call them that, or MAGA extremists, or whatever it is.
Right.
And then, so that way, whoever knows the lexicon knows who you're talking about generally, or they want you to think of. But realistically, if you're in a short form context like that, you shouldn't be trying to have those conversations in that small. It's
Right.
disingenuous, and all it really does is cause harm to the overall social conversation at that
and
point.
it causes
But
issues with
it kind of is what it is, though.
it causes issues with rhetoric if you're throwing around really serious terms like fucking tyrant and dictator. When people are calling Donald Trump a Nazi and stuff like that, like this.
What's an actual
you're,
Nazi now?
You're ruining the severity of this language by being so loose with it and so arbitrary with the way that you're implying it. When you see a real Nazi, but you've now called Donald Trump a Nazi. So what the fuck is that guy then?
Yeah.
What that dude who said I really hate all Jews and I want to kill them all. What is that guy if Donald Trump is a Nazi?
Yeah.
Is that dude a super Nazi?
He's
Or
a
are we
super
gonna make
Nazi.
up
Super
fucking
Nazi.
new words. for
Hitler
people
too.
that-
Yes.
Right. Like, what are we really doing here? Because that.
Well, it's like all the
it
Azov
removes
guys.
The power from that.
All the Azov guys in Ukraine. Those are
proper Nazi.
They're Nazis, right? But once you could call somebody a Nazi in a colloquial way if there are no Nazis,
Right.
because then you never actually need to call out a real Nazi. But if there's real Nazis about, which there's always going to be some Nazis around, or some neo-Nazi, whatever the fuck, you're going to have to be able to call them a Nazi. And if you can't call somebody a Nazi without just, you could also insert Donald Trump or one of his followers, some MAGA dude in a red hat. They're not the same. So it's bad to be doing that kind of stuff. We should not be doing that.
And especially with those type of extremely severe things, it risks creating a cry wolf type scenario. It's like, well, I don't believe you now because you've called the last 7 Republican presidents Nazis. So why do I care that you're saying this dude in Europe is a Nazi now? Like, he's probably just Donald Trump, but in fucking Germany, or that's a bad example, but in Poland, let's say. So
Donald Trump in Germany.
Shush.
Don't do that.